Hi, welcome to Restrocast. Today, my guest on the pod is Winglam, the owner of Wahoo's Fish Tacos. Wing's conversation was really interesting because I think running Wahoo's Fish Tacos for last 36 years, Wing is somebody who thinks and lives marketing. I think in my conversation with him, I discovered probably the earliest example of what influencer marketing done right means. And down to this year, for last 36 years, I think every layer that I peeled with him, I found a new influencer marketing. I will not really call it a hack, but I will definitely call it like a well-crafted campaign around, influencers and people who can bring a lot of credibility and eyeballs to the brand. Uh, I think the success and following of Wahoo's and Wing's work pivots around the fact that they care for their customers, they care for the food that they make, the freshness, the ingredients. But on top of it, it's definitely a genius marketing, brand positioning, and the basic thought process of how Wings thinks about location of their restaurants. It's not about somebody putting a restaurant somewhere and then figuring out how to bring people to it. It's somebody who first looks at what kind of people are coming at a spot and then puts a restaurant there. This conversation is definitely a must listen for every aspiring or an existing restaurateur. Do watch. Welcome to Restrocast. Wing, welcome to Restrocast.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for agreeing to do this.
Yeah, it's fun to be in Vegas.
Our research told us that you are called the ultimate wingman restaurateur. I really want to know a lot more about that, but we'll start from where it all started.
Okay.
How were the early years, and how did you fall into the restaurant space?
The story really starts back in Brazil. So luckily for me, my parents always immigrated to a place that was pretty welcoming to all of us, right? So China to Japan, all the way to Brazil. I opened one of the first Chinese restaurants in South America, in the early 50s. And then, all of us were born and raised in Brazil in the 60s and had a great run as a kid, having the only...
How come Brazil?
Because after World War II, if you're Asian, remember, we kind of all look alike. After what happened in Pearl Harbor, probably not the best thing to come to America, right? At the time, the climate wasn't as friendly. So you saw a lot of Asians in Peru, Argentina, Brazil, basically starting over again, right? Because the opportunities were much, much better because, everything in Asia, in Europe as well, because, what happened in World War II. So everybody came. So I would say the Europeans mostly came to America. A good number of Germans and whatever ended up in Brazil as well. So there we are. We know all of us are down there. And my dad, we ran the only Chinese restaurant in the little town we grew up in. But somewhere in the mid 60s, my dad got the bug to say, hey, there might be a better opportunity in America. So he ventured first in the late 60s and, worked for a couple of other friends and eventually found a restaurant in Newport Beach on an island of all places, which there aren't that many, islands. And this one, it happened to be Balboa Island. And in the early 70s opened, and it was just moseying along. The rest of us are all in Brazil having a great time. And then I call it those moments that change your life, right? There was a publicist in Orange County at the time in Newport Beach named Gloria Ziegner, who had one client, right? One big one, and it was Pilar Wayne, which was John Wayne's wife. So, Jewish people like Chinese food, especially, for celebrations and whatnot. Their restaurant was just kind of doing okay, wasn't very busy. So she came in one day and asked, hey, do you mind if we close it down, host a private, birthday party for my husband? My dad goes, of course. I mean, it'd be better than what we're doing, right? And then she went to Pilar and said, hey, would you mind asking your husband to stop by and wish my husband happy birthday? That's the real story. The story that came after was that my dad hosted a birthday party for John Wayne, because the picture of John Wayne and my dad went up on the wall. And the restaurant literally overnight went from 20% occupancy to an hour and a half wait to get in.
Wow.
It changed the history of our family. Because then my dad said, hey, Mom, can you bring all the kids to America because we need some free labor for all of us kids
Of course.
that could work in the restaurant.
Mhm.
So we uprooted in 1975. We all came up here. And basically, without speaking a word of English, here
Yeah.
we are in Newport Beach, which at the time had maybe a handful of Chinese families, right? If any. And here we are. And we went to work almost every day after school. And that was our crash course. And over time, I kind of learned English. But I remember the first time a customer asked me for a fork. I literally ran back to the kitchen. What is a fork? The thing you eat with? I go, aha, got it. And I came back with a fork. Then it was a spoon. Then it was a knife. I mean, that's literally how bad my English was because I didn't speak any of it.
And what other languages were you speaking then? Portuguese, of course.
Portuguese was my native, and then a little bit of Chinese with my parents. But while I was going to school, I learned Spanish because it was really easy. Because if you know one of the Romance languages, it's really easy to learn the other ones. So I immediately was fluent in Spanish within 6 months, which helped me talk to the dishwasher at the restaurant and everybody else. But it was really difficult to communicate with my friends at school because I didn't speak any English. So that was the I call it the moment. And basically through the 70s and 80s, that's what we did. We always helped out in my dad's restaurant. Eventually he opened a few more locations.
What was it called?
The original one's called the Shanghai Pine Garden, which is still open on Balboa Island after over 55 years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So my dad doesn't operate it anymore. Both my mom and dad literally live about 2 blocks away. And that's basically, where we learned all of our craft. Plus, the time we spent in Brazil.
That's some legendary story. I think the layers of it are just amazing. I mean, you're basically talking about engulfing the history from 1950 to 2024 today.
Yes.
Right? It's all in.
So you're looking at about 74 years, So my parents, they're in their 90s, right? So we went to school, did our little, paid our dues, learned English, and then he said, hey, I don't want you guys to work with your hands. I want you guys to work with your mind, because they never went to school. They basically dropped out after elementary school. So it was a privilege for all of us kids, all 5 of us, to go to college. So I already had an attorney brother. I already had another brother going to med school. So the optional thing for me as a notable career, right, was to become an engineer. Well, that didn't work out very well because I should have gone to my first choice school, which would have been San Jose State, a much more engineering-friendly school. Instead, I went to San Diego State. And as we know, it is probably one of the biggest party schools in the Western United States. So it made it really, really difficult for me to get to class because I was always getting sidetracked by all of my friends that say, hey, there's a party, there's something going on, there's girls, there's stuff. And I found myself literally having a hard time getting to the engineering school.
Who are you,
What was that?
Who are you?
I did. So eventually when you get that letter that you're on academic probation, because my grades were terrible because I was never in school. I said, you know what? I like where I'm at. I don't really want to go home. And I had joined a fraternity at the time as well. I said, you know what? I found out that literally 99% of all my classmates in fraternity were all in the business school. So that's when I said, you know what? Maybe I'm going to join the business school. And within it, I found the finance major, which again, I'm good with numbers. So I'm like, this is good. It's close enough to engineering. I'm still doing numbers, right? But it's not as difficult as calculus and chemistry and physics, So it worked out really well. It did take me 5 years because I basically lost my first year in school. And upon graduation, I did make my parents very proud because my first job out of college, I went to work for Rockwell International on the space shuttle program. So that worked out really, really nicely, But I was on the business side of it. But the whole idea that I got to go to LA every day from Orange County and I got to wear a suit, wingtips, the whole 9 yards, right? I fit in the American dream,
And also, I mean, impressing Asian parents comes with its own rule book, right?
Yeah, and it was fun for a while. But then, as we say, I'm not sure we call it, corporate America wasn't really ready for us, right? Because you got a little bit of ethnicity, the good old boys network, whatever you want to call it, the glass ceiling. So if you were a female or, of any Asian descendant, in the 80s, upward mobility wasn't exactly as easy as possible. So I hung out for a little bit. Then, luckily for me, another friend of mine from high school that was working at Rockwell called me, and we went to work for another aerospace think tank. And at that moment, things were really good because at least they let me do what I wanted to do. You know, I could build contracts, I could do proposals, I could do all the things, and actually use my finance degree. So that lasted a while. And one of the coolest thing is, which I have the claim to fame, is one of the contracts that I helped us, get for our company basically became today, as we know, the internet. Because at the time, there was a contract for real-time communications for the Air Force. So basically, is everybody on the same page before we launched the missile? So it was real-time communication. And this is
over the intranet, maybe in those days?
There wasn't the internet yet. But how do we make sure that we're all on the same page? Are we all good to go or not good to go? So they created a security network for communication. And the startup company that we use was Sun Microsystems.
Wow.
They were a $2 million startup.
Oh.
So we went up against the IBMs and all the big boys, and we said, we have the best mousetrap on how to communicate in real time. And that's the internet, right? So I left.
What year was that?
This is 1986.
Wow.
86, 87. And then literally right at that moment, there was an opportunity for me to move up. But then, as we call it, politics came into play again. And I said, you know what? I'm going to go try to do something that I know how to do. It's just, basically something that I love doing, which is hospitality, right? And my kid brother, Ed, was getting ready to get out of school anyway. And I said, Ed, nothing against corporate America, but I'm not sure they're ready for us yet, right? There's still a lot of old school, a lot of tradition. And Ed said, yeah, maybe what are we going to do? I goes, hey, we like to surf, but we're not really good at surfing. There's a difference between liking and being a professional, right? So a lot of people play basketball, very few play in the NBA. So we, in the Orange County area, was the mecca for action sports, surfers, skateboarders, and BMX, whatever. So I said, hey, maybe we can do something around that. And right around the time, we found a location in Costa Mesa because I was doing, some work with some other friends. And it was a business for sale. It was an old Italian restaurant. I said, what a perfect location. Because within walking distance or 5 minutes, we're within 7 of the largest surf brands in America. And as we say, I joke about it, if you build it, they'll come, but you got to build them close enough for they can come. And the beach was literally about maybe 2 miles away. So I said, this is a pretty good spot. And if we, succeed, we'll have everybody here from the industry. And remember, I had this old John Wayne thing that if I want to cater to surfers, if I can get maybe one popular surfer, maybe the rest will follow. So that was our whole strategy, right? And luckily for us, within, I call it 8 months of opening the store. So for the first few months, kind of like struggling a little bit. It wasn't that busy. But by the time the first summer came and we had then what we now know as the US Open of Surfing, then it was the OP Pro. All the surfers came into town. And by that time, we kind of had partnerships with all the big brands. And I said, hey, maybe they'll bring some of these surfers in. And they did. So when all the kids goes, oh my God, we're not just talking about a world-class surfer. We're talking about a world champion. So imagine what that does for your business, because all the kids goes, you got to go there because the real pros come. So at the first summer, we literally had 4 former world surfing champions in the restaurant at one time.
Wow. You've been using influencer marketing since then, huh?
It works, right? So before there was social media, we had to do it the traditional way. We had to get them literally in the store.
And that restaurant was?
The original was 1988 in Costa Mesa. Yeah.
That's the first one?
Yeah, the first one. So then about every year we'd open a store and we slowly grew. And then you talk about a moment in time that really changes again. We had, I call it, a small John Wayne moment through those first 13 years. And in the year 2000, this is, I call, the magical moment where it really turned and shifted. There was an opportunity for us to be in a national commercial. Merrill Lynch sent a memo out to all their brokers across the United States. They say, hey, do you have a small business client that would make an interesting American dream story? We didn't know that was the mission. We just said interesting business. So we sent in our little bio, photos and all that, and about 600 and so companies applied for it, and it got down to about 30, and then they called us. And my kid brother Ed was on the phone, and they're like, so you make tacos? what's the big deal? There's a million taco shops in America. So what's so different, impressive about what you guys do? And my brother basically said, hey, where else in the world can a Chinese guy sell Mexican food? It's the American dream. And they're like, what? And I go, look at the pictures we sent you. There's 3 Asian kids.
Oh.
And they had that aha moment. It was, oh my God, what a campaign, the American dream. So a few months later, they filmed us, and we ended up spending a year plus on television, on newspapers, magazines, talking about the American dream. So our business was already doing well, but it basically tripled our bottom line.
That is so cool.
So imagine any business having a $60 million marketing campaign behind it. I mean,
how many stores were you by then? How many locations?
we were at 13 stores at that time. 13 years, 13 stores.
Wow.
And then basically we started picking up the pace. So then we were starting 2 or 3 a year thereafter. And then opening franchise, because our phone line were going off the hook. But we weren't really in the franchise world. We wanted to be more like, hey, we want to have a place to hang out. And the main reason, again, this is part of the good and the bad, is in all the proteins that you can play with, fish is not one that you can easily teach somebody how to do. Chicken, steak, pork, relatively speaking, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, it's easier to do. Fish, depending on the thickness of it, it requires a little bit more eyeball and a little more training to go, that's just time to flip it. It's not just clock and go, right? So you can overcook it really easily, and you can undercook it really easily as well. So it became a little bit more difficult, but I said, well, that's our signature. Because as we all know, I wanted to have this fun place, but the backbone really wanted to be healthy, because I wanted to live as long as my parents did. So I would say, well, we've got to eat something healthy, not fried and all this stuff. So I'm like, it's a treat to eat fried foods. It's not necessarily good for you to eat it every day, right? So there's a lot of things that are good treats, but not a part of your regimen. Especially if you're trying to compete, trying to be like an instructor. Anybody that works out a lot, you want to be active. So you don't want to do things that counter the productivity, right? Because you're lifting a lot of weight, and then all of a sudden you're going to eat, drink a 6-pack of beer and eat, a dozen donuts. It's not necessarily the best thing for you. So that's kind of like the yin and the yang. We wanted to have something fun, but at the same time be good for you.
That is amazing. And hacking that marketing campaign on national television is a big one.
Yeah.
All these locations that you are opening are owned by you, or is it like a franchising model?
We have about 50-50. So like the locations here in Vegas, there's 6 of them. Our partner here, Matt, runs them. In Colorado, another friend runs them. So there's basically in the country now about 5 individuals that run about 25 locations. So very few.
And that happened post 2000, or?
No, we started in Colorado in the mid-90s because a friend of mine moved from California to Colorado, and perfect timing because Lodo downtown, Denver was redeveloping, lower downtown they call it. So the timing was perfect. He knew real estate, and it was perfect timing because we had this whole movement of Californians to Colorado. So he became basically a real estate developer / restaurant operator. And we've done really well there. It's over 25 years in Colorado.
That's really interesting. So, post 2000, I'm just wondering that you were already franchising, or you already had a taste of having a partner, running your show. I'm sure you might have been flooded with all kinds of franchising inquiries, and also companies that may want your brand to franchise them across the country.
Yeah.
I'm 101% sure that you did not give in to the temptation. Otherwise, it would have been like probably, 500 stores or 1,000 stores or a 1,000-store disaster. I don't know which one. What happened here? Why and why not?
Because in California, for instance, comparing like the burger guys, right? Most of them, I think, started in California, except for a handful, right? And the funny part is the smallest player in that group is the one that everybody talks about, right? So do I want to be the one that everybody loves, or do I want to be the biggest? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And because sometimes being the biggest, yes, you have the biggest pocketbook, right? But behind your back, what are people really saying, right? And I hear comments all the time by all the different chains, like, oh my God, how can you feed American people that food? And first of all, nobody's forcing you to go there. right? It's
Yeah.
I'd say the big boys, you go there more of a convenience thing than anything else, right? Because it's convenient, they're everywhere, it's quick, and that's why it's called, quick service, right? So the one guy in my hometown that it doesn't have nearly as many units, people crave it, right? And that's what so looking at both models goes, do I want to be the biggest or do I want to be the one that people crave?
There's this book called Small Giants.
Yeah.
Have you read the book?
No,
Do you know about the book?
Yeah, I know about the book, yeah.
You know what's the byline of the book?
No,
It says Small Giants,
yeah.
businesses who decided to be um, great and not big.
Yeah. Because basically to me,
it basically talks about literally what you just said.
Yeah.
Like your business is a perfect candidate to be, if ever there's going to be a part 2 of that book.
Yeah.
Your story needs to be told there, because that book exactly talks about that. Businesses which compounded to be bigger.
Yes.
But they, set out to be great.
Yeah. And to me, it's like, and again, accidentally, purposeful, a combination of both, is once you get to a certain level, i.e. 5 stores, right? It's so much easier to start commissaries, so much easier to do a lot of central things.
True.
But today, which I think is very clever, the word stabilizer. Stabilizers, they want to stabilize the food to transport from point A to point B, right? Otherwise known as preservatives. And again, you look at America in general, it's a great country, great opportunities. But when you start looking at, all the different diseases that exist here, they don't exist in other countries. Is, again, what we all say, we are what we eat, right? So a huge part of it is, like, should you be eating all these chemicals, right? And it starts literally at the farming side, because the cow wants to get bigger quicker, so how do we get them bigger, right? So all that, eventually we pay the price. We don't pay it while we're young, but as soon as you get into your 60s and 70s, all of a sudden, I can't quite move. I can't do all this, right? You wonder why, So I always thought, you know what? I like to be active, doing my surfing, my snowboarding, golfing until I can't do it anymore. But I just don't want to show up to a golf course and not be able to play golf, So the whole, lifestyle, the quality of life to me was very important. And you can't have both, I don't think, right? Because if it's not meant to be in your food, why should you eat it, right? And when you look at all these things that stabilize food in general to make a shelf stable, preserve it, all these things to transport it, is that something you should be eating? I'm not sure,
When you started your first store with your brother,
Yeah.
and you were, of course, you're trying to take over and turn around this location, which is, technically not doing well for the previous one.
Yeah.
What kind of role did you assume? Is it, from a surfer, golfer, the party guy, and the numbers guy?
Yeah.
Who are you as a restaurateur?
Because at the beginning, I was the oldest, right? And I was already married with a kid. I needed to actually get paid. So I literally did everything humanly possible that needed to be done. I was the cashier, I was the server, I was the busboy, I was the cook. I did everything because we couldn't really afford to have a lot of labor at the very beginning. So my kid brothers would fill in, and eventually they started, more and more. As they got busier, they got more full time, right? But I was the first one that really just needed a paycheck. But once we kind of said, hey, we're busier now, we've, like I said, the first day, we might have done $300 in business. And we're like, oh my God, this is so busy. $300 now is like you do it in a half hour, right? So it's all relative. So I basically, whatever needs to be done. And one of the things that I became used to is speaking, going out and networking, because I was just, Asians by nature, we're more quiet, we're more in the background. We don't really want to be on stage. We don't want to be anywhere where we're the limelight. So but I being, me being the oldest and me being at the front of the restaurant, I inherited these positions. So I became the face of the company, not by choice. It was more by default and necessity, So we joke about it today because it's been 35 years, but people still like, well, why weren't your brothers doing it? Because nobody really wanted to do it, but I was kind of like, I had to do it. I didn't really have a choice. They had a choice. They were like, yeah, let Wing do it, Because then it was like, oh, you deal with this guy, you deal with that. And I'm like, okay, fine, I'll deal with it. But along with dealing with all of the interviews, newspaper, that, people goes, oh, you're the Wahoo's guy. And I'm like, well, I am, but there's 3 of us. But majority of the time they know me because I'm out and about doing all the events.
So what part of restauranting you really realized early that hate may be a strong word, but then like you figured that, you know what, I don't want to be this part of restauranting, otherwise I'll quit.
There wasn't so much that I hated, but I figured out early on, unlike when you have a regular job, that no matter what you do, there's a paycheck on Friday. I realized by being an owner now that if I didn't figure out how to get people in the door, there might not be a paycheck on Friday. So once I figured that out, it would keep me up because I'm like, oh my God, at $300 a day come Friday, we might only be able to pay our vendors, but not our employees. So I started figuring out, how do I get people in my doors? And so I often now spend a lot of time telling all the new entrepreneurs, 1, you got to have something that's different. 2, you got to figure out how to get people to buy it. Because no matter how good you are, if you can't get people to buy it, it really doesn't matter. So restaurants don't fail because they make bad food. They fail because they can't get people in the door.
Whoa, yeah, that's a big, that's so simply said, but that's so true.
Yeah, because so to me, having a finance degree goes, counting the money that I already made isn't going to make it any bigger. Getting people in the door will make that number bigger. Yeah. So I only took 1 marketing class in college, but now I spend every waking moment goes, how do I get word out in the street? Because yes, there's a whole bunch of us making tacos here on the west side of Costa Mesa. How do I get all those people to come here and not go to the other places? So I would just find all the different gimmicks, strategies, campaigns, how to get them in here.
Tell me, like, give me some crazy ones.
Well, one of the fun things I always say, like going back to the John Wayne thing, is like, if I can find those kids, right, the influencers we call them today. So the ads that we ran forever in print until a few years back, because all the magazines are gone now, is we would find the up-and-coming surfers, snowboarders, whoever they were. And because I had relations with the brands already, I says, we're going to have this feature ad called Hot Groms, up-and-coming kids. And that's what we're going to feature. And not only are we going to talk about him, never in the ad was there a word about what he liked about us. It was about him, his stats, and his sponsors. It was so about cool. The kid.
Yeah.
And fast forward today, when I went to the emergency room the other day, take my mom out for a little cut, the doctor was a kid that I knew when he was 14 years old. I'm talking,
wow.
So musicians that are touring the world today, one of them, Donovan Frankenreiter, I've known him since he was 14 years old. So all these kids either became really big snowboarders, surfers, whatever, Shaun White, all these kids that we had, that when they were kids, we figure, hey, we're going to bet on these kids that one of them needs to make it. 99% of it, that was the highlight of their career. When they got on that podium as an amateur, that was it. They went on to college, whatever else they did after that. But the ones that made it to the music world, to the professional world, they've never forgotten us. So I figure that was the original way to influence. Because if that little kid is good enough to eat at my place, maybe if you snowboard, you maybe should eat at our place.
I mean, this is so amazing, Wing, because like one of the, I think, biggest marketing lessons that I learned from a friend of mine who, led viral marketing at one of the large online travel operator company in India is exactly this, where he actually probably in his career produced the most amount of viral videos, where his poorest performing video got 2 million views in no time. And one day I asked him that, how are you able to do that? Like literally on a shoestring budget. Like his costliest production was $400.
See?
Okay. And he actually told me what he just said. He said, well, brands start hooting, their own trumpet. Nobody cares. He said, in my videos, I'm just talking about people.
Yes.
And their life. And that's what they're interested in. And that's what makes them share it. He said, virality is really about share. So he told me, he said, Ashish, the most important button on Facebook in those days, he said, is not like or comment, it's share.
It's share.
He said, if you can hack share, your video is viral. If you are on like and comment, God help you. It's good for a family but within your family, I
Yeah.
scratch your back, you scratch mine.
Yeah.
But I actually started looking at it from that day, in B2B context, right?
Yeah.
So in my own context, it's extremely difficult to figure out virality. May be a big word, but it's really difficult to figure out marketing.
Yeah.
What you're saying is like it just hits so well.
The word today they use is user-generated content. To me, it's like, hey, stop talking about yourself. Talk about the people
Correct.
that enjoy your product. Talk to people that enjoy your brand, people that enjoy your services, whatever you're selling. Stop selling and share the stories about people that enjoy it. It's like what we talk about, networking, referrals, all these things. It only happens when it's genuine. People enjoy the experience that they had, the product. They're going to tell everybody. It's either the best or the worst, right? And there's really no middle ground, because if they don't love it or hate it, they just don't talk about it. So if you have a kid or an ambassador that enjoys your product, everybody will see through it, and you can't pay it. But a lot of brands, that's what they're forced to do. They're paying it. I'm like, it's not genuine, because we as consumer, we all know this. Are you kidding me? That's totally product endorsement, right? So I don't care how clever your campaign is.
Yeah.
I think the consumer is way smarter than that. So you literally have to use organic, like a local person, because you went to the high school with that person. You go to church with that person. You believe in them because you see them. And they don't have to have 10 million followers. They just have to influence your ability to buy or not. So these numbers are out there, and I'm like, and be able to tell people, hey, I have most of these friends, from all 35 years, because I never paid any of the athletes, because hey, I'm there at the event. They're eating my food, and you either like it or you don't. I'm okay with either one. Nobody loves or hates, but most of them end up liking, because it fulfills that part of the activity. Because you can't surf for 10 hours and not eat. You can't snowboard for 10 hours. So at some part, you're going to eat. And if I'm there complementing that experience, I'm going to be the brand that you always go, even when I'm not at a competition, I should probably go to Wahoo's, because maybe the next competition, they'll be there again.
So you are the genius marketer part of the restaurateur that's established. But, restaurant industry is crazy. And thankfully, you were definitely the cheap labor for your dad.
Yes.
Transported from Brazil early on, right?
Yeah.
But, how's the family, how did your family took it, and how does that work? Given, my understanding is that restaurant world is crazy because people socialize at your restaurant.
Yes.
And that basically means that most of the restaurateur's life, social life, goes for a toss.
Yeah.
How's been the life for you?
It's always a constant battle between the two, right? Because the family life, luckily on one side, me, Mingo, and Ed, the three of us that run the company, we, relatively speaking, we get along really well. I mean, we try to keep work to work, and then when we're a family, then we don't really talk about work, right? So that's a good line to, don't bring the work home, right? But the issue is most of my friends tend to be related to my business. Because, there's only so many hours in a day. So my beer guys, some of my soft drink guys, we're all friends. Because if I can't hang out with you, then I shouldn't really be doing business with you anyway. So, but it creates a dilemma, though, because you find out in most businesses, right? Somebody says, oh my God, you need a new attorney. He goes, no, I went to college with my attorney. So I don't care how good or bad he really is. We've been friends for 10, 20, 30 years, right? So our job is to create those environments, because when something does happen, like supply chain issues, well, if you're friends with your vendors, they'll find a way to get that product to you, whatever the service may be. And I tell that to everybody, because even though you're new, somebody may already have that business, or somebody's trying to get your business. So you constantly not only have to provide the product, deliver the goods, but you have to have a relationship with your client or your vendor, because that ultimately is the long-lasting part of what we do. So being in this restaurant for 35 years is always, hey, I tell the young guys, goes, hey, you need to do something different, but what are you doing that's going to be better than what I'm already doing, right? So if you can't change, why am I going to do anything with you? And this is kind of like this whole world now that everything's so technology-based. It's like, hey, yes, I can replace people with that, but how are you going to make it better, right? It's not just about costs, because everybody can go, well, I can make it cheaper. I go, well, yeah, today you might make it cheaper, but guess what? tomorrow somebody else is going to be cheaper than you. So it's not only about the cost, it's about the relationship and the service. So it's a lot of things that come into play. But more important, at the end of the day, if we don't like each other, like, hey, why are we here?
Tell me a little bit about your family. Tell me something. Like what's there? Your wife, kids.
My wife, I have two amazing kids. You know, my brothers, we all have kids. So the second generation, good and bad. Most of them have worked in the business, our nieces, nephews, and kids, but none of them necessarily want to be in it because they realize how much work it is. You know, it's really hard. Luckily for me, my 8-year-old now loves when I pick him up in one of our branded vehicles. So given the choice between driving in mom's car or my car, hands down, you know, when he wants to drive in the taco truck, whatever. So it is fun. So I enjoy it that he's able to tell all his friends that I own Wahoos, you know, and so with all my nieces and nephews. So it's an amazing opportunity. So the balance is always there, you know. So I always tell my wife, goes, honey, if I didn't have Wahoos, probably wouldn't be able to get the concert tickets we have, right? So there's a lot of that, the give and take. So yes, we may not have as much privacy because when you're out and about, you're going to run into customers and they always love to go, oh my God, I love your restaurant, which is way better than I hate your restaurant. But at the same time, there are days that you just want to be out and just be anonymous, right? And those days are far and few in between. Because even when we travel abroad, somebody goes, oh my God, you're the guy from Wahoo. I'm like, oh my God, we're in wherever, right? And it is fun, you know? And I'm sure like any other professional athlete or celebrity, it's fun to be acknowledged for your, you know, great job that you've done, right? So I appreciate it. So I always, you know, strangers or not, I'm very grateful whenever I see a customer or a friend that say, hey, I went to high school with you, I went to college with you, I've been a customer for a number of years. So I love the thank you, you know, I appreciate, you know, the good words and the kind words, you know. But yeah, a loving family right now, you know, my wife and I get along great and it's, hey, we just got to keep the ball moving, right?
Is she like, what is she?
My wife, Kelly, is into wellness. So when I met her, she was in construction, which she wasn't really happy about. And I tell everybody, if you don't like what you're doing, what would you really enjoy doing? But when she found out that, you know, she really enjoyed yoga, but I hate to tell people, unless you own the yoga studio, you don't make a lot of money, just like any other business. You may like to cook, but unless you own the restaurant, you may not make as much as the owner, right? So when she became certified yoga instructor and she got her first paycheck, she was like, oh my God, it's so little. I was like, well, you should think about doing something else. So she started a wellness company that basically uses insurance dollars that's available to everybody. And so that the services that you as a, you know, employee of a company get, you don't have to pay for. Because whether it's a yoga class, eating, you know, happy hour, or some mental, you know, whatever it is, it's paid by insurance company. So she's been having a lot more fun. It's still not a ton of money, but she's having a much more, you know, fun time doing that than she did before.
Do you think it's a threat to, you know, restauranting, the fact that you're saying that the next generation really looks at it as, oh, this is too much work and probably not a great idea. And I can see that not only in the like second and third generation restaurateurs, possible restaurateurs of current times, I can also see that in the service staff, in, you know, people who are getting, you know, not getting into the industry. Where do you think this is going?
Well, I think the main issue is not only is it the hard work that they can see, it's also this generation is used to not doing this. They're used to doing this. So the idea that they have to deal with an angry customer in face-to-face scares the daylights out of them. And I think there's a great quote that I think Mike Tyson uses it on social media. They're so easy to criticize because you can't punch them in the face if you do that in real life, right? Because they would never dare to say that if there was a possibility that they would literally get knocked out. But via this, all day long, I'm going to complain, tell you how an idiot you are. I'm going to go off on you because you can't touch me. But you would never dare to do that in real life. So you find a lot of these delivery companies, a lot of things that you don't have to deal with interface with the consumer. So you find warehouse jobs, a lot of things that you can just hide behind an office. And as long as you don't have to deal with it. But the problem with that is that I'm seeing is a lot of the kids when they really want to move upwards, the one skill that they lack is that social skill. Because they don't know how to deal with people that are angry. They don't know how to deal with people that are mean. More important, they don't know how to deal with people that don't agree with them.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't
operating in conflict or agreeing to disagree is not really a...
Yeah. So what they see on social media goes, I hate you or I like you. That's it. I go, no, there's that middle ground that you need to get along, because not everyone's going to be on the same page, right? And that's the major skill that I see a lot of this next generation. I think especially people that are maybe, I would say, mid-30s and younger, they're not used to it. Some, because of wherever they went to school or...
Yeah, people who necessarily, like last 20 years had internet.
Yeah.
Who grew up on internet.
Yeah. But I see that as, because you can tell, because you're going to get customers that literally come into my store, they're ordering through the app because they're maybe afraid to talk to my cashier, and they're paying sometimes 30 to 50% more than they would if they would have came into the store. And then on top of it, they sit down and eat. And I'm like...
Do you think that's the reason why self-ordering kiosks and mobile ordering and this QR code ordering is picking up?
Yes.
Really?
It's just the people, it's just so much easier to go yes, no, than, oh, what would you like? The whole idea that they have to talk to somebody, because how often have we seen the kids, whether they're 8 years old, 15 or 20 or 30, there'll be 4 or 5 of them at a social gathering and they're all on their phones. And I'm like, why are you even getting together? You could have just all stayed home and done the same thing. But here you are at a party, a restaurant, and you're sitting around all doing the same thing again. I'm like, what is going on with you guys?
That's so amazing. I never thought that. Yeah, I mean, somebody like me, I run a restaurant technology company.
Yeah.
But somebody like me is absolutely anti-technology. If you go to a restaurant with me,
yeah,
I'll be the first one to ask the server, do you have a physical menu? I don't want that digital menu. Just for the life of it, I wanna feel that menu.
Yeah.
And then a part of my experience is to chat with the server.
What do you recommend?
Which, by the way, nowadays I find funny that servers are also not interested to talk, right? So
Exactly.
it's like, it's confusing. They're like, well, look at the menu.
Yeah.
Like,
and I'm like, what do you recommend? Do you like this or that?
Everything is good here.
Everything is good. No, come on. Do you like the chicken better? No. So there's something missing. So that's why sometimes when you go to an old school diner, somebody that's been around for a long time, right? You appreciate the friendliness, the eagerness, everything about what they do, because it's human, right? So that's the piece, So technology, yes. Would I rather hit a few buttons than have a server that has no personality? Yeah, but much easier, right? So I think airports is the first place, because airports in general are very non-humanized, because, 20 years ago, pre-internet, you might have had, 50 agents to one kiosk. I think today is like 90% kiosk in one agent kind of a thing, right? Because it's much quicker. We just know where we're going to go, and we don't need to deal with somebody, right? Because the possibility that they might have had a bad day could ruin our day too, right?
I think airports I understand as well, because airports by design are supposed to be efficiency machines.
Yeah.
You're not going there for gourmet experience.
Exactly.
You're not, in fact, going there for an experience. You're just very transactional. You want your food. You maybe wanted to catch the next flight coming out. And you're right. And I also think that, I travel a lot.
Yeah.
And across the world, I can tell you that, whenever I have had any bad experience in any country, it's mostly at the airport.
Yeah.
Right. And I empathize, with them, because I understand that, probably this person is dealing with so many nationalities and so many random people from all different moods and bad travel and all, that their general response is hostile.
Yeah.
The general response is push away.
Exactly, because the thing is, we all know traveling is, in general, is not very enjoyable unless you're flying first class, your own private cabin. But the majority of people, which is like 90% of the people, don't want to deal with it. And the flight's delayed, this. You just had to get charged for your luggage. Whatever you just had to do that you weren't anticipating. It just puts you in that space already. So guess who gets the brunt of it? That server that serves you next. She's just going to get it all. Whether, whatever delay was, because you're stuck now for 2 more hours, you don't really want to have that drink, but you're stuck there. So you're going to have a drink. And if that waitress or waiter isn't at 110% in their best behavior, they're just going to get an earful. And no matter what they do, you're still going to go a Yelp complain about what they just did, which is, to me, it's like a really sad situation, right? So you take that out. Now you go to a regular restaurant, and even if you had a great day, yes, you're not going to take it out. But for some reason, whoever is there, by nature and definition, two things that drive me crazy. The customer's always right? Not always the case. And two, yes, they're servers, but they're not there to kiss your behind. I hate to say it, right? They're there to bring you the food, take your order and all that, but they're still humans, right? So when you have this little, dictatorship relationship, the customer to the server, it's just like the new generation, I don't even want to be there. Where the old generation is like, I'm going to turn it around and I'm going to overkill you with kindness and I'm going to make this your best experience ever. So that's our mindset of the old school. The new school is like, you had a bad day, I don't even want to talk to you. And I didn't want to be here in the first place, but I couldn't get a job in the accounting department or whatever company, so I'm stuck here. I'm an aspiring actor, whatever it is, I'm stuck here. And this is only a short period of my life, and I hate it, So I don't want to listen to you, and I don't care.
You've been restauranting. I mean, you've been a restaurateur long enough.
Yeah.
And a successful one, and a peaceful one, as I can, perceive from this conversation. What's your challenge today?
The big challenge today is that we're talking about is in the last year and a half with rising food costs at over 50%, labor at over 50%, right? How do you translate that? Because for some reason, you can go to a supermarket and you don't think twice about, it's more expensive. You pay. You don't buy it. But when you come to a restaurant, you raise it by 5%, and you're like, oh my God. How dare you charge me, 25 more cents for that taco? It is like this catastrophe that just happened. And you're sitting there going, oh my God, have you gone to the supermarket lately? But for some reason, it's your choice to be in the supermarket, so is your choice to be at a restaurant. So the angry consumer is like, oh my God, right? And so you have this, so we're trying to find ways to, hey, how do we catch up to the labor and the food costs? So technology is one answer, and vendor relationship is the other. So on the backside, how do we streamline some of the things, get a better price for, and not necessarily trading down. That's never the answer. Because consumers will know immediately that the portions are smaller or the product is inferior. So that's not the answer. The real answer is you got to be better at it. So that's where technology comes in, both in the front and the back of the house. Because if you can eliminate a couple of positions or make it more efficient, and whatever that means, you're going to be able to get back to where you need to be. So right now, across the nation, everybody's having the same issue, is how do we get to where we were pre-pandemic?
What's your challenge personally as a restaurateur? This challenge is of the business. But my question is more about that after 40 years in the business and running it successfully. Does it get boring?
The big thing for us is pre-pandemic, we literally had 5 days a week worth of business. Post-pandemic, best case scenario, you have people back to their office for 3 days. So 3 out of 5, that means 40% down. So as a marketing person, how do you market to 40% of the people that are not in their offices?
But hasn't delivery made up for that?
Delivery doesn't make up for that. Because in the delivery world as we know it, very few takeout orders include beverages. And the main part of the restaurant's profit margin is in the beverage consumption. Whether it's a soft drink or an alcoholic, that's where the margins really exist, not in the food side of it. Because the food, with existing labor and food costs, it's almost non-existing. So if we went to an all-delivery system every day, we literally have to raise the prices by 50% to get back to the margins we were pre-pandemic. And which is, nobody's going to buy it at that level, because now we're literally pricing ourselves like full service. So that's the dilemma, right? It's like, how do you provide that experience and get people to pay for it? And it's impossible at the moment. And when food takes out, I hate to tell you, when it sits in that little hot container box, it keeps cooking. So that vegetable that was nice and al dente when you had it at the restaurant, it's nice and mushy by the time you get it home. That pizza that was nice and crispy when you had it, it's nice and soggy when you get home. Right? The hamburger bun, all those things are just not the same as when they got it at the restaurant.
So did you start delivering post-pandemic?
We've done a lot of deliveries. So one of the I call it switches that I made is I figured out what the best food that would travel well, and that's what I tell my customers to order. The burritos, for some reason, the longer it sits in that little foil, the better it gets because the flavors start blending together. It doesn't get any soggier or any cold or anything else because it stays nice and hot. So you got to acclimate, So and it was also easy during the pandemic to have individual meals that was portable and didn't drip all over yourself. So like unlike a chicken sandwich or a burger, you need two hands because that thing is just going to run all over you. A burrito that's wrapped in foil stays nice and easy to eat.
So are you not delivering? I mean, do you not open other items for delivery? Or?
We are still doing the delivery, but the margins aren't there. So the idea that I need people, restaurants, we need people to dine in. Delivering food for a restaurant, not a ghost kitchen. For restaurants, the dining is where the margins are at.
And what about the ghost kitchens?
What was that?
What about the ghost kitchens?
The ghost kitchen is basically a glorified, commissary or glorified food hall or glorified. They work well, but again, you need density. So if you're in a downtown area, it works well because there's a lot of people that live there. There's density, and most people that live in I call it small quarters, they don't want to cook. So like a Manhattan, like in New York City, when you have all these concentration of people, I guarantee you most people never cook in their apartments because it's too small.
Yeah.
So that's where ghost kitchens really work because you have less staff and all that. But if you come to Newport Beach, it's a 50-50. And the issue you have there is not that they don't work, is that most college students, they tend to order takeout after 11 o'clock at night. And think about it, if I can't get people to work during my regular hours, you think anybody wants to work after 11? So it's, again, the dilemmas, right?
Isn't that a big opportunity? Like,
oh yeah,
ordering at night?
It's a great opportunity.
And I see a lot less people really making, most of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm like in Bay Area in San Francisco. Yeah. It just baffles me that how limited the options are post 11.
Because think about it, would your wife want you to work after 11 o'clock at night?
Maybe.
And that's the dilemma because in the restaurants in general, the number one issue is already working Friday and Saturday nights. So think about it as a manager, the store is not going to run by itself at midnight to 5 in the morning. So who's going to manage that operation? Usually it's not a young person, it's usually somebody who's already married.
But I see a lot of large brands, like for example, I can tell you with no disrespect to Wendy's, I think in the last 1 year, anytime I've had a Wendy's burger, that was at, because I'm ordering at 1 a.m.
Yeah. But again,
because they were the only ones available or,
But there are certain, types of restaurant chains that it doesn't require, I call it a chef, it doesn't require it because it's buttons, right? 2 minutes on one side, 1 minute on that. So relatively speaking, it's easier to manage, right? That's why pizza places in general tend to be the ones open late at night. And I mean, not saying that it doesn't require a lot, but relatively speaking, easier to train somebody to make pizza than anything else.
You don't really require chef skills.
No. Yeah. You can train somebody relatively easier. If it's, like I said, not tossing the whole thing around, but basically it's almost ready to go. Yeah.
What's happening with Wahoo's now?
Well, right now we're getting ready to go back into Austin, Texas, because we did lose a couple of the stores there. So hopefully by this summer we'll be there. I'm looking at other locations to see if we can, there's a handful in California that we're looking at. We're also going back into airports. Universities, we're talking again, because we did well during pre-pandemic, but universities shut down. Some of the airport locations shut down. Some of the venues shut down. So it's all reopening. Everything's back to full speed again. So it's just basically, and we got to find that sweet spot again on how do we get back to making real money, not, I call it, pennies on the dollar.
Bing, who are you as a leader? Like people who work with you directly, who are either reporting to you or who are, directly impacting the area of work that you do?
Well, to me, it's like my DMs, because I like crazy ideas, because I'm also do a lot of the menu development part and a lot of the marketing. So the idea that even today, it's, we can talk about it's being March 11th, 3/11. There's a band that's very famous called 3/11. Today, there's a campaign that if you come into any Wahoos, you buy 3 tacos, you get a free soda and a free order of chips. 311, right? So the whole idea. So, but I have then to talk to all my DM and goes, hey, how do we execute? Make sure that we tell the customers, it goes, hey, here's the promotion. So all my crazy ideas to bring people in, then I got to talk to my DM and goes, how does this able to be executed? One of the other bands we're talking to for this summer, they're launching the 60th anniversary of not the Endless Summer, but the Beach Boys. So how do we do something with them? So a lot of my ideas, I mean, for the last 3 weeks and the next few weeks, this is Lent for the Catholic Church. So we do Lent Fridays where we promote eating fish on Fridays. So a lot of my things goes, hey, it's going to drive people, but then how do we execute and get them to come back? So I'm always talking to operation because my crazy ideas are only as good as I can execute them on the back end. So again, having some technology augment this might make my process easier.
So what's the manual you give to people when they are dealing with you? Like what to take care of, how to not piss you off, and what happens when they piss you off?
Basically, don't come to me with, I call it, problems. Come with me with ideas, right? Because if you say, hey, this isn't working, I'm like, yes, I can see it's not working, but what are we going to do about it? So when you come to me with a problem, come up with like 2 or 3 ideas of maybe what we can do about it, right? Because to me, complaining, I already get enough of that from the customers. I don't need it from you guys too, right? So as a team, how do we win the game together, right? So how do I make your job easier? How do I make my job easier, right? So at the end of the day, we're all trying to solve the same issue, right? Increase the bottom line, traffic, all that, because if we can take care of the top number, the bottom number will take care of itself.
And the promotions that you're talking about, how many of them are like local bases, like the city or the state your stores are in, or is it like a national campaign each time?
Some are local, but most of them are national, because there's plenty of Catholic goers all over the country. So we share the ideas, we share the videos and all the promotions. 311 is touring across the country, so there are opportunities to do ticket giveaways, promotions all over the country. Summertime, there'll be other bands touring. So some of the local festivals we can only do here, but a lot of the tours are national and international, so we can do some really fun stuff. So the part of me is, if we're going to do anything, might as well have a little bit of fun doing it. Because again, nothing against the Beach Boys, they've been around for 60 years, but I'm sure there's plenty of us that still want to meet them, right? Because it's just fun. So there's a big part. And like being in Vegas, I mean, we have a great franchisee here, Matt. It's just about, hey, what can we do in Vegas? Because Vegas is the only stores that has the video pokers in it too. So if you talk about technology, they've always been ahead of everybody else because there's the player's card. They were the first, I think, to use it anywhere, right? So it really tracks the consumer spending, the habits and all that. So as soon as they hit that $25 threshold, here comes the free chips. As soon as they hit that, here comes the gin and tonic, whatever. So there's drinks, there's food, there's all these different things. And we know everything about the customer's spending habits, right? In this case, the gambling habits, right? So these are amazing things. So why not learn from it? Because I think the player's card was, I think, one of the first, and I think supermarkets were the other one where you sign up and you get the discounts, right? So those are, again, the loyalties, all that, they've been around. It's just restaurants now are finally beginning to really catch on because it's about frequency. Because once you get a customer, it's way easier to get them to come back than to try to get a new one.
I've been hearing this notion from, the undertone, what I'm experiencing last 2 years post-pandemic is that a lot of big boys in the restaurants, like large brands, they are feeling that American market is kind of saturated for them, and they're kind of venturing out. Like I can tell you that this week I had the third brand who basically said, well, we don't really have much space left in the American market for us, and we are going to, like, for next 5 years, we are only looking at global expansion. And this was the third brand in a week. On the other side, I also see that, the new restaurateurs are minting, everywhere. How do you see restaurant industry's evolution from this lens in the next couple of years?
It's going to be more about, like I said, the consumer now, you got to give them a reason to come to you. And I call it not just come to you, but just get out of the house in general. Because these days, the only movie theaters like we go to now are those all-inclusives where you can literally, it feels like you're at home. You're in a lounge chair, they bring food to you, but it's not a cheap date. So at the time you take a family of 4, you're looking at a couple $100 to go watch a movie. We can very easily just, do it at home via cable, whatever. So the experience is what you want to have, right? So I look at theme parks. I look at fine dining because guess what? I don't care how good of a cook you are at home. For some reason, one, you can't get the quality, or two, you can't get that thermal, cooker to go to 1800 degrees, right? So there's certain things so I see the high end as a destination where, again, you don't have to do the dishes, you don't have to do all that. And more important, you have an expense account. Because my belief is because a lot of top end guys don't spend a lot of their money doing lunches anymore because one, they don't have to go to the office. They have a much larger expense account come the weekends that they can entertain the top clients. So I see a lot of that. So the rest of us have to figure out if we're not getting the day workers, what are we really getting? Maybe we're getting the moms, maybe we're getting the kids. So what kind of experience can we bring to the kids that is different than them going to somewhere else? Because at the end of the day, everybody in the fast food end, it's about convenience. Because is somebody's burger that much better than the other one? I think it's more about the convenience and location, right? So then in the middle, we're kind of now getting a little bit of that as well because there's so many of us. When I started, pretty much there was a handful of quick casuals. Now, like you said, there's a lot of us. So what's the difference between us and the other ones, right? So if you can find that besides a location, right? Because again, if you're on Main Street on the beach, you got a location, you can beat everybody else, but there's only so many main streets. So you got to have something else. So maybe you're near a movie theater, you're near a mall, maybe. So the destination thing becomes a big factor. So I think to me, it's like, hey, you can't skateboard at home. You got to be next to a skateboard park. That might be an option, right? So to me, I love the idea of having like a surf pool because I've been to a few and there's nothing like it. So if I could build more restaurants around surf pools, that's what I really, personally, because then I can go surfing too, right? So a little bit of that. Oh, I love Top Golf. I mean, that is the model because golf ranges, dime a dozen. Top Golf is an experience.
Interesting. So you are saying that are you encouraging new restaurateurs to, have, like small boutique experience than let's say a large chain that is thriving? Because post pandemic I can also see that a large percentage of business went to known brands in the name of hygiene and processes and whatnot. I know that it's probably not there anymore, but some of it really stuck.
Yeah, it's a combination because even malls today, I mean, Macy's just announced that within the next 3 years they're going to be gone anyway, right? So, but you just got to find the places where the kids are going, the families are going, right? Because there's certain businesses that are booming, and like Disneyland, you can't go anywhere but to see. You want to see Mickey? There's only 2 places in America anyway, but there's others around the world. So something along those lines where they can't get it anywhere else, and they got to come to you, right? And that meaning, and not necessarily just your restaurant, but like something that's next to you, whether it's a bowling alley, a tennis, facility, a golf course, whatever that means, right? Because then it's going to be part of that ritual, right? It doesn't mean you need to be at the golf course, unless, like it says, it's a Top Golf, because then you have a really cool captive audience, right? But golf courses, tennis clubs in general, they're not that busy anymore than we are. But if you're near one, that might enhance the experience.
How do you keep yourself nurtured? What do you do for the brain? What do you do for the soul?
What we started is during pre-pandemic, about 50% of what we do in the community is about the community, right? So it's about the charities, the schools, and the organizations. So during the pandemic, it was more by accident than anything else. We started a group called the California Love Drop. And that really is the model going forward because one, it allows us to not say, remember we started this whole thing about not being self-centered, having user-generated content. When there's a group of us friends that say, hey, we're doing this on behalf of the California Love Drop, and in it there's all the different components, the yoga lands and all that, so it's not self-centered. So what we used to do just for the frontliners, we now do for multiple charities. and local communities. So we are able to deliver computers to the Boys and Girls Club. We're able to deliver backpacks to the YMCA. So we're able to do a lot of things. And in that delivery, in taking care of the kids, there's going to be a little bit of food, a little bit of frozen yogurt, and maybe some Monster Energy drink. So we're able to tell our story, a community story that isn't like, look at what Wahoo's did. It's about this group. And through it, because we were able to create this, we partner with a few local media outlets. And the most impressive to me is a radio station in Southern California called KLOS, which is an old rock station. And just so happens that the morning DJs are the #1 DJs in Southern California. So having Heidi and Frank as our partners in this movement, it gave us this platform to not only talk about it on social media, but talk about it on the radio. So think about that for a second, be able to be on the radio every week and talk about what you're doing in the community and mentioning some of the brands that are involved. So I call it traditional media validates the social and vice versa, because a lot of people over 30 would have never heard of us. But because they listen to the radio, they're like, oh, guys, I've heard of you. So it's kind of fun to be out and about and having somebody say, oh, my God, I just saw you at this event, or I heard you on the radio. So that's what's kept us going. And now that the pandemic's kind of like semi behind us, all of our friends says, but we really enjoyed this 4 years together. Can we keep doing it? I'm like, why not? Because I did all the charity events anyway. So now instead of just doing it as Wahoo's, we do it as the California Love Drop. And we joke about spreading the love.
Do you read? Or any podcasts? What do you do to keep your, to keep your learning engine on?
Mine is teaching. So I love lecturing, which I do all the time. And more important, I do career days at different colleges and whatnot. I've taken a little sabbatical because I have an 8-year-old, but I spend a lot of time having my son teaching marketing at 3 different MBA schools in Orange County, which for a guy who only took 1 marketing class, I think is pretty funny.
Awesome.
And I teach basic case studies on how to take companies from A to B, and real companies. And I basically use it as both sides. Is building your own brand is really the name of I got the gist of it. Because whether or not you're going to work for somebody or you're going to start a new company, it's all about what you bring to the table, whether you're a person or a company. So I've had great success teaching it. I currently am talking to Chapman University about going back, because the new dean heard about my crazy ideas and the way I used to teach, loves it. And, so I'm contemplating right now, it's just finding the time though. But I really enjoy it. And by teaching, I get a lot of stuff that what's going on now, right? So you get, oh, that's old school. I'm like, that's the way we did it. But how do we do it now? Because things are changing, right? And it's much rapider now. And you don't need nearly as much money as you did back then, because you might just be able to start in your garage. You don't need a brick and mortar to do a lot of the things that are happening right now. So it's an interesting time, but teaching is really fun. And basically, seeing, I call the students go, aha, right? And recently I did it with a high school, and a lot of the things that they wanted me to implement on TikTok and Instagram were things that I used to do in print. They just have a new platform, but it's basically the same model, just in a different platform. So I joked with the teacher, goes, maybe I can have these kids for the summer. And we're talking right now about getting interns for the first time. We're talking about getting 15-year-olds. And because they understand how to talk to other 15-year-olds.
That is so awesome. I think you found the portal to, be in touch with 15 and 24 and 30 year olds today.
Yeah.
Wing, that was a phenomenal conversation. A
Thank
lot
you.
of learning for me, but loved really every bit of it. Congratulations on what you're doing at Wahoo's, what you've done so far, and really excited to see what's coming.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.